What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Tuesday, April 12th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NBA playoffs. We have a 2-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the point guard position. So the stud on the slate at the point guard position, I'm going to pay up for this guy. I like Kyrie Irving from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing point guards, but Kyrie Irving has averaged 46.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 38 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. Now, he's only projected at 48.4 fantasy points here tonight, but this is the playoffs. He's going to be playing monster minutes, and I think he can score 52 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more. He's $10,700 DraftKings salary, $500 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. And Kyrie Irving has scored 54, 41, and 51 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 39, 39, and 42 minutes. So I am absolutely expecting him to get 40 minutes or more in this game. Remember, he didn't play the whole season, so he is super fresh and ready to go, and they are going to run him until they can't run him anymore. I expect 40 plus minutes per game in the playoffs. He's got monster upside, so I like Kyrie Irving here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. The other stud on the slate, these are my 2 favorite studs on the slate, Kyrie Irving and this guy, Paul George from the LA Clippers, playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 10th worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Paul George has averaged 46.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 34% usage rate. He's projected at 53.6 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.4 times value. He's $9,900 DraftKings salary, $300 less on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 230.5 points scored in this game. Paul George has scored 58 and 46 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 33 and 28 minutes. So Paul George is a little underpriced compared to the other studs on the slate, and he's got just as much upside as those other guys. A fantastic matchup. So I like Paul George here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, now here's a value play at the shooting guard position. I like Norman Powell from the LA Clippers playing the Minnesota Timberwolves. And Norman Powell has averaged 29.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. I think he can score 28 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,400 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel, and he scored 28 and 32 fantasy points in his last 2 games, playing 22 and 22 minutes. So I like Norman Powell, who scored 19, 25, 48, and 30 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Timberwolves, here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won. And we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Caris LeVert from the Cleveland Cavaliers, playing the Brooklyn Nets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing shooting guards. Caris LeVert has averaged 30.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. Now, I'm not in love with this DraftKings price, but I do love this FanDuel price. So he's projected at 31.7 fantasy points here tonight. Now, on DraftKings, that's only 4.6 times value, but on FanDuel, that's way over 5 times value. He's $6,900 DraftKings salary, but he's $1,500 less on FanDuel. So I love that FanDuel price. Caris LeVert has scored 19, 29, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 33, and 31 minutes. Now, you just got to be a little bit careful at looking at this game log for the last 3 games and the first couple of games of the playoffs, because remember, the last 2 or 3 regular season NBA games, the minutes and the production from these players is all over the place. Sometimes they're resting players, or they're just taking it easy, trying not to get injured because they don't have anything to play for. So I would wait until there's a couple of playoff games under their belt before you really start paying attention to this last 3 games minutes and fantasy point log. But I do like Caris LeVert here versus the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I like Caris LeVert on FanDuel here versus the Brooklyn Nets, and we see that Caris LeVert scored 29, 50, and 35 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Brooklyn Nets. So I think he's a smash FanDuel play, but I may stay away from him on DraftKings. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. Of course, we gotta bring this guy up. Kevin Durant from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Kevin Durant has averaged 52.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 31% usage rate. He's projected at 54.7 fantasy points here tonight, but he just may well go out there and score 60 plus fantasy points. His last 3 games, he scored 59, 55, and 69 fantasy points, playing 40, 41, and 42 minutes. So he's playing monster minutes. It's the playoffs. The ball's going to be in his hand a ton. He's $12,000 DraftKings salary, $600 less on FanDuel. Got to get some Kevin Durant in your lineups. So I like Kevin Durant here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. Couple of value plays for you here at the power forward position. Now, if you want to play those studs, you've got to find some value somewhere. And it tends to be hard to find value in the playoffs because, you know, they play the first string guys for so many minutes. A lot of times these second string guys don't play as much. So I like Jared Vanderbilt from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the LA Clippers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Jared Vanderbilt has averaged 23 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with an 11% usage rate. He's projected at 22.4 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.7 times value. He's only $3,900 DraftKings salary. He's $600 more on FanDuel. Now, he scored 4, 25, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games. But you can throw that last game out. He only played 14 minutes. The other 2 games played 32 and 20 minutes. So I think this is my favorite value play on the slate. He's got a decent track record here versus the Clippers. And at $3,900 DraftKings salary, doesn't need much to hit value. But even if he scores his season average of 23 fantasy points per game, that's like 5.8 times value. He'll crush value. So I like Jared Vanderbilt here versus the LA Clippers.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now this guy's not so much of a value play. I guess you'd call him a mid-range play here, but he's playing a lot of minutes and he's been super productive the past couple of games. So take a look at Bruce Brown from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing power forwards. Bruce Brown, he's averaged 21.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 15% usage rate. But take a look what he's done in the last 3 games, which take this with a grain of salt because you just don't know how he's going to play in the playoffs or how many minutes he's going to play. But he scored 43, 55, and 23 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 39, and 32 minutes. So if he does play 32 to 39 minutes, I think it makes him a pretty attractive play here. Now, I would put him at 30 plus fantasy points and 5 times value or more if he can get those minutes. He's $5,800 DraftKings salary, 1,000 more on FanDuel. So probably wouldn't play him on FanDuel. This would be a DraftKings play for me if I need to save some salary somewhere. So I like Bruce Brown on DraftKings here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, moving on to the center position. So you got Karl Anthony Towns as one of your studs. I think I prefer those other studs that I mentioned, but you know, Karl Anthony Towns can go out there and put up 50 plus fantasy points and easily get you 5 times value or more. So I wouldn't ignore him, but I do like those other studs a bit more. Like I would probably play Kyrie Irving over Towns, and I would probably play Paul George over Towns. But I do like Karl Anthony Towns here versus the Clippers. One thing that is a bit concerning is Karl Anthony Towns only scored 30, 31, 46, and 30 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Clippers. So not great player versus team history. So that's why I would be a little bit concerned. But moving on here, I like Andre Drummond from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Cleveland Cavaliers. Andre Drummond, this guy's just a point per minute monster. He scored 41, 38, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 19, 23, and 17 minutes. So let's see, he's averaging 1.36 fantasy points per minute. So if he can get 25 plus minutes in this game, I think he can get 32 fantasy points or more. He's $6,500 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel, but he's got that 30, 40 plus fantasy point upside, and he can do it in limited minutes. So we're going to see how many minutes he plays here in the playoffs, but I do like Andre Drummond here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay, now if you need to save a little bit of salary at the center position, take a look at Ivica Zubac from the LA Clippers playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 10th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. Ivica Zubac, he scored 34, 35, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 23, 24, and 25 minutes. So he is on fire, and he's projected at 25.8 fantasy points here tonight. But I think he can score 30 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more. He's 5,700 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel, and he's got a pretty good track record here versus the Timberwolves. Scored 28, 37, 24, and 23 in his last 4 versus the Timberwolves, but he hasn't scored under 34 fantasy points in his last 4 games. So he's on a roll. So I think I'm going to go with the hot hand here, especially if you need to save some salary to fit in those studs. His price tag is reasonable. So I like Ivica Zubac as somewhat of a value play here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.